So one of the really common sort of oxymoronic phenomena that we see in American politics is that the people that you sometimes see most loudly shouting about how the Constitution says I get to do something, or the Constitution says you don't get to do something, or you don't get to force me to do something. The people most loudly shouting that type of stuff are often the people who least understand the Constitution. We've seen this with free speech. We've talked to First Amendment experts about how the people most loudly and most frequently yelling about free speech and the First Amendment actually don't understand it. In the COVID era, in the pandemic era, that same constitutional confusion, as we might call it, applies to vaccination very, very analogously. And more we're hearing that, listen, it's in the Constitution. You don't have to get vaccinated if you don't want to. You can't violate my constitutional rights by forcing me to get vaccinated. We hear that any vaccine mandate would be a violation of your constitutional rights. And this actually couldn't be more wrong. Now, I want to be really clear, because sometimes when we do a conversation like this, people wrongly think I'm saying something that I'm not actually saying. The issue of the legality of vaccine mandates in general by a government is a topic of much legal discussion, and there isn't 100% agreement about could the federal government mandate a vaccine versus would it have to be done at the state level or whatever the case may be. But it is not a constitutional issue, period, and there's actually precedent, which we will talk about in a moment. So we can make a moral case for a vaccination requirement, but that's not actually what this is about. We could make a cultural or a public health case for a vaccination requirement. But again, that's not actually today's topic. There is no constitutional case against vaccine requirements. So let's go through the likely arguments that the anti-vaxxers would make along these grounds. They might say a vaccine mandate violates the First Amendment to the Constitution. They might say a vaccine mandate violates the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution. And sometimes they say a vaccine mandate would violate the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. Now, the First Amendment protects speech, the Fifth, religion, and the 14th, the right not to be, quote, deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. I don't believe any of these would hold up, but this is not a show where I give legal opinions I come up with, because legal is not my area of expertise. My assessment is just, what do the legal opinions say about exactly this issue? And I've told you before that in the early 20th century, there was a legal controversy over vaccine mandates, not dissimilar to the one we're seeing today. And it took place in Massachusetts, and it was surrounding smallpox. And the Supreme Court decided in 1905 against a guy who refused to get the smallpox vaccine. The Supreme Court decided that the state's vaccine requirement / the city of Cambridge's vaccine requirement was perfectly fine, saying that your liberty stops at its likelihood to damage or do harm to other people. So it's actually a relatively simple concept, even in libertarian circles, sane libertarian circles. This is the case of Jacobson v. Massachusetts. You can Google the case. There's a very simple wiki article explaining what it's all about. So there is Supreme Court precedent for enforcing vaccine mandates. That ruling from 1905 has been referenced repeatedly, even in the COVID era, by the Supreme Court. When vaccine requirements have been upheld, this 1905 case has been referenced. Now, in terms of speech generally, the government can prohibit behavior that is generally protected by the First Amendment if it is demonstrably to save lives, to preserve life. And the infamous kind of prototypical example is the government can ban yelling fire in a crowded theater, even though speaking and saying the word fire generally is protected speech. Speaking is protected speech. But this is a case where the government can actually say, you can't do that. And people might say, but sir, that's my free speech. That goes beyond free speech. It goes into public safety. And the fact that yelling fire in a crowded theater is likely, much like a ton of people refusing to get vaccinated, to have a predictable, deleterious, harmful effect on public health and on people. Now, there is another issue here, which I think I should mention, and it's the issue of hypocrisy. There is almost always hypocrisy from these right wingers. My body, my choice on the vaccine. Same with a woman's right to choose, right? No, that should be illegal. Wait a second, what? That's a double standard. And we'll talk tomorrow about what's going on with the Texas abortion law. And here, with the case of the vaccines, many of those opposing the vaccine mandates because it's government overreach had no problem with the Patriot Act, NDAA, mass surveillance, etc. The same people who have been fighting for decades for businesses to have all the power and the employees to have none suddenly want to take away the right of a business to say, hey, our business decision is that our employees have to be vaccinated. Our business decision, which conservatives have said for decades we should be able to make decisions that are best for us. Our decision is customers must be vaccinated. All of a sudden now they're against that. So yes, they're pathetic. Yes, they are hypocrites, but they're also wrong on the facts. And that's a unique combination: pathetic, hypocritical, and wrong on the facts. And on the constitutionality of vaccination mandates, you do not have a constitutional right not to get vaccinated. The details of vaccine mandates, if we see them, are going to be adjudicated, and we'll handle them one by one. But that blanket, it's almost used like a cudgel. That's a violation of the Constitution. Really? Which part of the Constitution or Bill of Rights? And the arguments very, very quickly fall apart. We'll have more on this, as I assume, I expect maybe is a better way to say it. I expect that there will be more legal decisions about vaccination requirements and mandates upcoming. As we continue to follow Joe Biden's approval rating decline recently and his accomplishments, and as we continue to close in on the start of the 2022 midterm election, it's hard to deny that the biggest political question in terms of the next 6 to 7 years of American politics is the question of whether Donald Trump will run for president in 2024. We can pretend that there are other bigger questions because we would like to believe that the question of Trump is over, but it's not the case. Trump won under unusual political circumstances in 2016 and then lost under a relatively rare situation in 2020 where an incumbent president loses re-election. That's not a common thing. It happened 8 or 10 times in American politics, but typically when presidents run for re-election, they win. Trump's base seems as committed as ever to him. He's been doing rallies. He says he's going to soon be doing rallies in key election states like Iowa. And over the weekend, we heard from not one, but two Trump insiders, his former strategist, Jason Miller, and perpetual brown-nosing Republican Congressman Trump suck-up, Jim Jordan. We heard from both of them. Trump is almost certainly running in 2024. And Jim Jordan even saying he's about to announce any day. So let's get right into the clips. Here is Jason Miller appearing on a channel or show called Cheddar News, says that the odds are 99 or 100% that Donald Trump runs in 2024.
What's the likelihood President Trump runs again in 2024?
I would say somewhere between 99 and 100%. I think he's definitely running in 2024. Had a good conversation with him last night. I'm going to go see him in another couple days here. He has not said the magical words to me, but if you talk to him for a few minutes, it's pretty clear that he's running. And I think just what we've seen unfold in Afghanistan recently has really just emboldened that.
So that's Jason Miller. And then Congressman Jim Jordan says Trump is, quote, about ready to announce. This is video once again from Lauren Windsor. She's been doing great work. In this video, Lauren pretends to be a Republican. And check out what Jim Jordan says. And we're going to have it from two angles for you here.
We're big fans of everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
President Trump, he's going to run again.
You think so?
I know so. I talked to him yesterday. He's about ready to announce after all this craziness in Afghanistan.
Yeah, like Biden should.
Yeah, he said.
Part of my friend.
No, he said he's really bad. Really bad. So, well, thank you for coming.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
We're big fans of everything you're doing.
Thank you. President Trump, he's going to run again.
You think so?
I know so.
Okay.
I talked to him yesterday. he's about ready to announce after all this craziness in Afghanistan.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Like, Biden should.
Yeah, he should.
Pardon my French, Congressman.
Yeah, he should. He's really bad. Really bad.
Okay, well, I want to know.
Well, thank you for coming.
Thanks a lot.
So Jordan says Trump's going to run again. I know it. I just talked to him yesterday. He's about ready to announce. Now, they could both be wrong. They could both be knowingly lying because there's been a decision made that it's good strategy for someone to claim that Donald Trump is running or likely running even when he isn't. I don't know. But more and more things are pointing that way for sure. Now, as I've said before, I know that this is horrifying in terms of what it means for the country. But if Donald Trump does run and is the Republican nominee in 2024, he has a really good shot at winning based on what's going on today. Things can change, but based on what's going on today, I don't know that I see Joe Biden defeating Trump in a rematch. This is not, people will write to me. They'll say, David, you're poisoning the well. Now, I just tell you things the way I see them. Right now, I don't know that I see Biden defeating Trump in a rematch. If Biden doesn't run and it's Kamala, as I've outlined before, I don't know that I see Kamala defeating Donald Trump. This is just me being real. And of course, us knowing this and getting together around it could prevent it from happening. But my preference is to soundly defeat Trumpists in the midterms so that Trump hopefully sees this is not looking good for me. All of my strongest followers, or many, have been defeated, and chooses not to run to avoid the embarrassment of another loss. If we think of 2022 as a sort of referendum on Trumpism and all of them lose, Matt Gaetz, Jim Jordan, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Boebert, Cawthorn, they likely won't all lose, but if a bunch of them lose, that might be the signal that convinces Donald Trump not to run. So is Jim Jordan a known liar and he might be lying here? Of course. Sure. Is Jason Miller a known liar? Absolutely. In his professional and personal life, from what we've heard. But lots of signs point to Trump running. Now, here's the counterpoint. When I was on Michael Cohen's show, Michael Cohen, of course, Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen said he doesn't think Trump runs in order to avoid the shame of losing again. But that's sort of what I'm saying also. If Trump becomes convinced that he will lose, I don't think Trump will run. I think we just don't know that yet, in the sense that the 2022 midterms are going to be our signal about whether Trump is likely to do well in 2024 or not. Either way, I believe that if Donald Trump runs, the GOP won't stand in his way in terms of the primary. You'll have some challenges, but they won't be serious, and the party won't get behind the challengers. But a disastrous 2022 for Trumpism may be what gets Trump to say, you know what? I'm not going to get involved because the risk of humiliation is too high. Let me know what you think. You can find me on Twitter at @dpackman. If you ever feel like you just don't have enough time to read all the books you want to read, you have to check out one of my favorite apps called Blinkist. Blinkist takes thousands of popular nonfiction books and distills each one down into an ebook or audiobook that you can get through in just 15 minutes, where you're getting all the key takeaways from the book. Just imagine how you'll be able to expand your horizons and knowledge by being able to soak up all of the important insights from 10 different books in an afternoon. Obviously, it's perfect for exposing yourself to a new book you otherwise wouldn't have time for, or you can use it to revisit a book you've already read, or use it to preview a book before you buy the full version and read it. I recently read A Brief History of Time, of course, by the great Stephen Hawking. This is a book that I have been aware of for so long, and other things got in the way, and it was fantastic to check it out on Blinkist. Blinkist has books on politics, philosophy, science. They have 27 different nonfiction categories, and a subscription is only about $8 a month, and you get access to the entire library. But you can try it totally free and get 25% off a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/Packman. That's BLINKIST.com/Packman. One of our sponsors today is Helix Sleep, and it's a sponsor I'm thrilled about because I sleep on a Helix mattress at home, and it's just the perfect mattress. One of the best things about Helix is you don't have to guess which mattress do I need, which one will be good for me. You take their famous sleep quiz on their website. You tell them your body type, your sleeping position, your back pain issues you might have, and they will pair you with a mattress that will be perfect for you. I took the sleep quiz. The mattress they suggested was exactly what I needed. I often get too hot at night. The mattress keeps me cool. It's not too soft. It's not too firm. The texture is right. And I've just been getting way better sleep. You only buy a mattress every decade or so. Don't get stuck with something that's not perfect for you. And all Helix mattresses come with a 10-year warranty, and they'll even come to your house and pick it up within 100 days if you don't love it. But I think you will. All of my viewers will get up to $200 off your order, and you'll get 2 super premium pillows for free when you go to helixsleep.com/Pacman. That's HELIX sleep.com/PAKMAN. You can also find the link in the podcast notes for this episode. Remember that the David Pakman Show is an independent media program. We don't have, MSNBC's Phil Griffin telling me what to do or say, or whatever the case may be. Rupert Murdoch, if you can imagine. We really are funded directly by folks like you, and you can sign up for a membership at joinpacman.com. We do an extra show every day for our members, and you can use the coupon code BETTER21 to save off of the cost of a membership. Look forward to seeing you on the bonus show today. Another brawl broke out at an anti-vaccine protest. This one is in the UK at the British equivalent of the American FDA. We're going to look at the video in a moment. This took place at the offices of the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency. This is basically the British FDA. The MHRA is responsible for ensuring medicines and medical devices work and are acceptably safe. So very similar to the US FDA. This video we're going to look at, this brawl, took place in Canary Wharf in London. The anti-vaccine protesters ended up mostly fighting with police as they showed up and tried to storm the building. The situation escalated when the police started trying to push the mob away from the building. Let's take a look at the video. If you're just listening, you won't get the full picture, but you will certainly be able to realize it is total and absolute chaos based on what you're about to hear. Watching it just gives you even more of the insane context. This really is like a cult of sorts. And the latest I read is that 4 police officers were hurt. The entire, back the blue, defend police stuff has gone completely out the window in these brawls from the very same people who normally are saying, but the police, we must keep them safe. I guess against vaccines, it's all of a sudden acceptable not to prioritize the safety of police officers. And of course, as the protesters become increasingly unhinged and the police are in danger, the police start taking out the batons and striking back at the rioters. And then the rioters use that to their advantage. They say, look, the police were beating us willy-nilly because we're concerned about vaccine safety. And of course, it has nothing to do with that whatsoever. It's always the exact same story. When you see videos like this, it's almost like these are COVID enthusiasts, like fans of the virus, protesting in favor of the pandemic. It's really crazy stuff, made even crazier when you consider some of the facts. First of all, the vaccines are safe. Secondly, no one is being forced to get a vaccine in the UK, where this brawl took place. It will be mandatory for home care workers in England. They have to be vaccinated as of October. English nightclubs and other venues with large crowds are going to require proof of full vaccination starting at the end of this month, at the end of September. That's really it for now. Like, what are they even really protesting? And of course, individual businesses could make it mandatory. Schools could make it mandatory. So that's the sort of second piece of the idiocy that's taking place here. But then third, cases and deaths have both spiked significantly in the UK. So why wouldn't people want to go and get vaccinated? And so this is complicated enough, the pandemic, without these people. but the future of the pandemic is particularly uncertain thanks to them. Tomorrow, we're going to go over a new report from the Washington Post, which says for scientists, the path to COVID's endgame remains uncertain. And that's a significant understatement. Kids going back to school, we're very quickly seeing cases pop up. Some schools already closed. Do we need third doses? In Israel, they're talking about fourth doses modified for the variants. An insane amount of uncertainty. The people brawling with police against vaccines out in front of the regulatory agencies, they're not helping to bring this to a close any faster. That's for damn sure. And they're only going to extend how long this goes on. And then just to really illustrate for you how significant these delays are in getting people vaccinated and in taking safety precautions, we're going to move on to the next story about 15 Miami educators who are dead in 10 days from COVID. School in Florida, in most parts of Florida, started right around August 25th, 23rd, etc., including in Miami-Dade County. 15 educators are already dead in the first 10 days. Now, importantly, we're not saying they all caught it at school. In fact, some of them probably caught it before school started. But these are not particularly auspicious numbers for the entire school year. Here's a report from NBC 6 in Miami-Dade County. 15 staffers of the Miami-Dade County Public School District have died from COVID in the past 10 days. Sonia Diaz, a spokesperson for several unions, confirmed the number of deaths to NBC6. One of the educators that lost their life to COVID was Abe Coleman, a teacher for more than 30 years. Coleman was also a mentor and site director for the 5,000 Role Models of Excellence program. He helped shape the lives of hundreds of young men over the years in the organization that mentors minority men. On Tuesday, Coleman lost his life to COVID at the age of 55. 55. Officials haven't released the identities of the other teachers or staff members, and a Miami-Dade County Public Schools spokesperson said the district doesn't release the cause of death for employees or students. This is a disaster on so many levels. First of all, you've got Ron DeSantis in Florida saying no masks in schools, no mask mandates in schools. Many schools are just straight up going against Ron DeSantis and saying we're wearing masks in schools. On a practical level, what's worse for school kids, wearing a mask or the trauma of their teacher dying? Think about that for a second. I'm trying to think back. If a teacher of mine, I liked basically all my teachers in elementary school, and the class was close to many of these teachers. If a teacher of mine had died during the school year, it's hard to imagine, actually, what that would have done. I remember when one teacher was out for a month with heart issues and we had a substitute, and it was really stressful for the class. I remember when a different teacher, I think it was in 7th grade, fainted and EMTs came in. It was really stressful. And here we're talking about 15 educators, some of them teachers, just dying during the first 10 days of the school year. And the alternative, of course, is not that it would have prevented every death. Some of these teachers got it outside of school. But when you see this seriously happening, how do you say, well, let's just not wear masks? The masks really aren't a big deal for these kids. So tomorrow we'll get into in more detail what really seems to be an uncertain future for this pandemic. And we'll get into the details of why, but not a good start. My sister was telling me on day 2, someone tested positive at her school. She's a senior in high school. And maybe the details don't really matter, but the point is, it's hard to imagine this is going to go particularly smoothly. And if schools aren't even requiring the kids wear masks, it's going to go even worse. We'll have more coverage of this on our Instagram. Find us at David Pakman Show. Find me on Instagram at david.pakman. Let's be honest, most healthy snack bars are not exciting like my live streams. And that's why you should check out our sponsor, Monk Pack. Monk Pack Keto Nut and Seed Bars are sweet and delicious, soft and chewy with a big satisfying crunch. But each bar has just 1 gram of sugar, 2 to 3 net carbs, and just 150 calories. So it's great for someone on a keto or low carb diet, or even if you just want a tasty, sweet snack without the sugar. Monk Pack Keto Nut and Seed Bars come in great flavors like sea salt dark chocolate, caramel sea salt, or caramel, you choose, and peanut butter dark chocolate. I always have a box of these ready to go in my pantry, which is easy when you do the optional monthly subscription, which also saves you 10%. If you have a sweet tooth, this is the way to indulge without the guilt, whether it's for breakfast or in the car or after a workout. Go to monkpack.com. The link is in the podcast notes for this episode, and you'll save 20% when you use code PACMAN at checkout. One of our sponsors is SteadyMD Primary Care, the easier and more affordable way to do primary care, and they're giving you 50% off because you are in my audience. You just answer a few questions. SteadyMD will match you with a licensed primary care physician that's tailored to your needs. You'll have a 1-hour virtual appointment and start a meaningful relationship with your new doctor. And from then on, your doctor will be available to you by text, phone, and video chat. It's not some random doctor on call. Your SteadyMD doctor has a limited number of patients. You get the attention you deserve, and they can help you with anything your primary care doc normally would. It's very cool how it works. You don't need insurance. It's just $99 a month, no other fees or copays for visits. Take the free quiz and see which doctor is a perfect fit for you. You'll get 50% off your first month when you go to steadymd.com/Pacman. There's no risk, no long-term commitment, and the link is in the podcast notes. It's great to welcome back to the program Thom Hartmann, who is, of course, host of the Thom Hartmann program, author of the Hidden History series. The latest installment is The Hidden History of American Healthcare, Why Sickness Bankrupts You and Makes Others Insanely Rich. Great to have you back on, Thom.
Thank you, David. It's great to be here.
So I've talked about this a little bit before. Wendell Potter has written about this particular thing I'm going to ask you about. Uwe Reinhardt, in his last book, wrote about it. There was a point in time in the U.S. in the early 20th century where it was sort of looking like we may be going in the direction of, if not a straight out single payer system, something much more like what Germany and some other European countries have. And that was short circuited. And there are important political and historical stories to be told about that. To pick that maybe as our entry point, what happened during that time that derailed that path for the United States?
Which are you talking about? Teddy Roosevelt, 1912?
Right. Wait, I should clarify because there's more than one. Yes. So Roosevelt in 12 and the period between World War I and World War II was relevant. I mean, feel free to jump in wherever makes sense to start the story.
Yeah. Well, we've had multiple American presidents suggest this, and it has. And it's not like we didn't have a role model. I mean, Germany got this in 1884, and it was from Otto von Bismarck, who was no flaming liberal. He saw it as a way of strengthening Germany and building industrial policy and mollifying the masses. For a whole bunch of his own reasons that were ultimately good for the country as well. And we've had a number of politicians who have tried to bring it about. The thing that blew it up back then, which is quite different from what's blowing it up right now, or somewhat different, was Frederick Hoffman and the Prudential Insurance Company or what was then the Prudential Insurance Company, and this whole program called scientific racism that even President Woodrow Wilson, the Democrat, had bought into, as well as pretty much everybody else, and that really started in the 1790s when Hoffman came over here from Germany. He was a young man, married a Southern belle down in Georgia. He was a an absolute genius with numbers. He was the guy who, working for Prudential, he worked his way up to vice president. He was the guy who figured out that there was an association between lung cancer and mesothelioma, between smoking and lung cancer, between asbestos and mesothelioma. And he wrote a book about the association between processed food diet and cancer, which is still in print. So he was a big deal at the time. And he did the math on mortality and morbidity for white versus black people and came to the conclusion, influenced heavily by his wife and the environment in Georgia where he was living, came to the conclusion that black people were so genetically inferior that if we simply denied them health care for a couple of generations, it would, quote, solve the race problem in America because they would all die out. And this plugged into a program that he had helped start called scientific racism, which then led to eugenics in the 1920s, that Hitler picked up in the 1930s. And that idea that if we simply deny health care to black people for a couple generations, it will cause them all to die out, or many of them, most of them, not only animated the anti-healthcare movement throughout the early 20th century, it's the reason that Southern senators, the Democrats at the time, the Dixiecrats, fought to have a 20% hole in Medicare in the 1960s because they felt that that would make it very, very difficult for black people to get any kind of health care. They didn't want them showing up in white hospitals or white doctors' offices, even if they were over 65. And that was the shtick. I'm not sure if there's a specific other incident that you're thinking of that you'd like to.
That's a lot of the one other is, and I think it's Wendell Potter who wrote about this specific element, which was that between World War I and World War II, there was a sort of renewed push for going in the direction of a single payer system in the U.S., but sort of for political posturing reasons. It felt and sounded too German at a time when that was politically inconvenient, and that also created a roadblock at another time where there was some momentum building.
Well, Frederick Hoffman actually wrote a series of pamphlets about that and gave numerous speeches saying, I'm from Germany, and he was a rabid anti-communist by that time. I'm from Germany, and this program that Bismarck started is really communism in disguise, and you don't want this. And I mean, he became the principal he died in 1946. He became the principal spokesperson throughout that period, basically from 1905 to 1940, 1945, against a national healthcare policy. His principal argument was the racial argument. He also had the chops, the cred, to say, I'm a German, I was born in Germany, I lived under that system, and it sucks, and you don't want it. So, those two things combined, and there were obviously a lot of other people who were echoing what he was saying.
When you think about the situation now that we have with healthcare in the United States, in terms of it as a for-profit system, in terms of a system that is contained within states, do you have a sense that the most radical change, to use that term not pejoratively, but the most drastic change is likely to come from within individual states that want to try different things? Or do you believe that the most radical change is likely to come from the federal level down?
I'm guessing it's going to happen from the states for two reasons. One, because that's how it happened in Canada, and we're very culturally and politically similar to Canada. And Saskatchewan got this in the 1960s, and then other provinces around them said, "Whoa, that really works well, and it saves money. Let's do that." And it spread across the country, and eventually the federal government got into the act and said, okay, we will backstop you guys and offer some standards. But every province in Canada has their own different Medicare system that does cover all of their people, but some, cover dental and some don't. I mean, there's subtle differences between provinces. We have in the United States both California and Vermont that have passed legislation turning their states into single-payer states. The problem that we have in the United States is one that I never really was able to find out if this was put into law in order to prevent single payer, or if it's just, how the, clumsy aspect of how the laws were written. But one of my best friends was the head of health, education, and welfare in Vermont when Vermont decided to go single payer, and they got the legislature to pass it, and the governor to sign it, and everything. And he was tasked with putting it together. And what he found was that the federal law says that Medicare payments can go through the Medicare system directly to Medicare recipients, and Medicaid can go through the state, but it has to go to Medicaid recipients, but it has to go through a system that's basically called Medicaid, or the state version of it. Different states, particularly for children, have their own little branded versions, but there's very clear definitions of how that money has to flow, probably largely to prevent fraud or, states from making off with it. But what that means is that if Vermont was to go single payer, Vermont would have to pick up the responsibility for all the people in the state over 65 and for all the low income people. And there would be no federal funds available to them for that. And so billions of dollars every year that come into the state would cease to come into the state. And all it takes to fix this so that our states can do single payer, and like I said, we've got two that are primed and ready to go, is a very small tweak in federal law that provides a waiver basically to Medicare and Medicaid to be able to provide that money instead of to the recipients directly to the state with some oversight. And that change in law has been proposed a number of times. It's, I believe it might have passed the House the last time around. But that's the sticking point right now.
Sometimes I'll hear different versions of the following argument as to why a system that works in a country with 5 million people would not work in a country of 330 million people. And it's some version of, and I'm sure you've heard this, because the United States has so many more people or so much more diversity in the types of people, you can't expect something that works in Norway to work in the United States. Now, from like a purely actuarial perspective, in general, the bigger your risk pool, the more predictable your expenses are going to be. So mathematically, I don't really understand that argument. What are the reasons why that's not a very good argument against such a system in the United States?
Well, let me boil that argument down for you, David. It's essentially the same argument that John Stennis was making, the Southern Democrats were making in the 1960s about why we needed to have a 20% hole in Medicaid. And basically what it is Norway doesn't have a lot of black people.
Right. That's what they mean by different types of people.
That's exactly what they mean.
Yeah. Wow. And this has been looked at. In general, is it right to say that a much bigger risk pool overall makes for more predictable actuarial?
Yeah. The larger the country, the more efficient and effective their single payer system would be. And, the countries that have done it so far and done it well, Germany, I think, has 53 million people. France is in the neighborhood of 40, it's been a long time. High school geography here.
Yeah.
But the UK is, I don't even want to guess what the UK is. But none of these countries are 350 million people, but the entire European Union is 850 million people. And to the best of my knowledge, every country in the European Union has some form of a national healthcare system. The one exception being Switzerland, which mandates everyone to buy insurance, requires the health insurance companies to be not-for-profits and the hospitals, and will pay your insurance for you if you can't afford it. So it's functionally the same thing, but their system is a little more of a kludge, and as a result, they have the second most expensive system in the developed world, behind us. But it's still not even close to us. It's we're way up here in terms of what we pay, and then Switzerland, and then all the other countries down here.
Yeah. On that note, sometimes I will tell my audience about how different countries in Europe have different systems. And for example, Germany's system is not it's not what we imagine Medicare for all would be. There's a combination, and sometimes people are combining what the government offers with some nonprofit supplemental. France has a different system as well. I'm sort of agnostic in terms of exactly how it's set up if we get to universality and affordability for everybody. Do you think that it's a good thing to be open to looking at the different ways in which different European, and actually Singapore has a different system as well, that's probably worth looking at as well? Or do you think that it really has to be Medicare for all as envisioned by a contingent of those in the Democratic Party?
If you want to look at a country where it really works the best in the world, and there's no debate about this, look at Taiwan.
Okay.
Taiwan has a pure single-payer system, and because of that, they have a national medical database. And because of that, they were on January 21st, the day after we got our first COVID case a year ago, January. Mm-hmm. They got their first, the day after they got their first COVID case, and they were able to use that system to do contact tracing and testing, and kept their death rate for the entire year of COVID. The first year of COVID kept it below 200 people. While Donald Trump let 500,000 Americans die. That's a system that works really well. I lived in Germany in the 1980s when their healthcare system was still largely 99% really just a single payer system. What happened, and the reason why you're seeing all this so-called diversity, David, is that in the 80s, there was this major project launched. It really was launched in 1978 by Margaret Thatcher in the UK. But by the 80s, it had become a whole new governing paradigm that is sometimes referred to as neoliberalism. And its core tenet is that government can't do anything right. As Reagan said in 1980, January 20th of 81, when he was inaugurated, government is not the problem. Government is the cause of the problem. It's not the solution to the problem. And so as country after country adopted what are called neoliberal reforms, and as the EU began to incorporate neoliberal policies into their charter that required countries, for example, not exceed 3% of debt of GDP debt, of 3% of debt relative to GDP in any given year, et cetera. The stuff that just brought Greece to its knees during the crash in 2009. As that happened, more and more countries started, one of the biggest pieces of neoliberalism, of course, is privatizing government functions on the assumption government can't do anything right. It's why more than half of our power and water in the United States is now provided by for-profit companies, and which is also why, California burned and 83 people died in the Paradise Fire, which PG&E was convicted of, and why the high tension lines down south going to New Orleans never got buried because they had to pay their stockholders. But anyhow, that neoliberal infection was caught by a number of European countries, most notably France and Germany. And, the UK, I think, to a large part succeeded in pushing it away, which is kind of ironic because so much of this started with Maggie Thatcher. But that's what you're looking at. You're looking at experiments in bringing more and more so-called free market stuff into healthcare. And many of them are just not working well at all.
Yes, that is an understatement to say the least. We've been talking about Tom Hartman's latest book, The Hidden History of American Healthcare: Why Sickness Bankrupts You and Makes Others Insanely Rich. Tom, I really appreciate you being on. Of course, there's this whole other side of the book about the medical bankruptcy and the profitability, which we should take up at another opportunity. But I really appreciate you being on.
Thank you, David. Thanks so much for having me.
One of our sponsors is privacy.com. They're giving you $5 when you sign up for their completely free service at privacy.com/Pacman. I've been using Privacy for a little over a year now. You've heard me talk about it before. It's a lifesaver, and here's how it works. It takes just a couple of minutes to set up. Anytime you buy something online or on the phone, instead of actually using your real credit card number, the Privacy app and the browser plugin let you give each company a randomized virtual credit card number that you create out of thin air. It'll even autofill the card number with one click and the payment is taken out of your checking account without the merchant ever knowing your real information. So this allows you to keep your banking information secure, but also to take control of your finances. You can create up to 12 of these virtual credit cards a month. You can set spending limits. You can freeze them. You can delete them anytime you want. So when you do this, it means you're not going to be charged when you don't want to be, because you can destroy the virtual card number right after using it, which, for instance, I love using free trials because I know I won't be charged when the trial is over if I use a virtual credit card number. You're keeping your identity private by not telling companies who you are. You're keeping your bank or credit card info protected against data breaches and identity theft, and it's free. And like I said, you'll get $5 to spend when you sign up at privacy.com/Pacman. You can find the link in the podcast notes. All right, let's continue on a very busy news day. Over the weekend, there was, I believe, a Rolling Stone story that started floating around about car accident victims being turned away at emergency rooms because they were filled with people who took ivermectin. And that story was not true. But because of that confusion, there is now another story that is a real story that relates to statements made by the Kansas Department of Health and the Environment that some people are not taking seriously, which is a real story. KDHE, this is a press release from the Kansas Department of Health and the Environment. Okay. This is from a few days ago. KDHE urges Kansans not to take ivermectin for COVID-19. With a rise in calls to poison control centers and visits to ERs, the Kansas Department of Health and Environment is urging Kansans not to take the drug ivermectin unless prescribed by a physician, then take it exactly as prescribed. This drug is not approved or authorized by the FDA to treat or prevent COVID. Ivermectin has been approved in humans to treat specific skin conditions like rosacea, head lice, or some parasitic worms. Ivermectin is used in livestock as an anti-parasite medicine and can be found in livestock supply centers. Livestock drugs are highly concentrated for large animals and can be highly toxic in humans. Can you believe that this is a statement being put out by a state health agency in the United States in 2021? The statement goes on to say, Kansans, this is a quote from Lee Norman, Dr. Lee Norman, secretary of KDHE. Kansans should avoid taking medications intended for animals and should only take ivermectin as prescribed by their physician. These highly concentrated doses can cause severe illness and even death in humans. The COVID vaccine remains the most effective way to prevent COVID. An ivermectin overdose includes GI symptoms such as nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. Overdoses are associated with hypotension, meaning very low blood pressure, and neurologic effects such as decreased consciousness, confusion, hallucinations, seizures, coma, and death. Ivermectin may intensify the effects of other drugs that cause central nervous system depression, such as benzos and barbiturates. The COVID vaccine is the safest, most effective way to prevent getting sick and protect against severe disease. I mean, it's almost like satire. It's unbelievable that this is going on. They also put out a tweet saying something very similar. Kansans should not take the drug ivermectin unless prescribed by a physician, then take it exactly as prescribed. Ivermectin is not approved or authorized by the FDA to treat or prevent COVID. What's really nuts to me is saying, I won't wear a mask. I won't take an FDA-approved vaccine, as the Pfizer vaccine now is, but I'll take something I bought from a vet absent any data that this is good for COVID in humans. Or in some cases, there are some doctors who will prescribe you ivermectin for COVID. Or I'll take something that is an off-label use, and off-label use can sometimes be okay, but that has not been shown to actually work for COVID. They're saying, I won't trust actual medical research on what does and doesn't work, but I'll trust my so-called research on ivermectin. And they defend this practice saying, the WHO lists ivermectin as an essential medication. It's been around a long time. It's really cheap, and so they aren't making money on it. So that's why it's not being prescribed. But then when asked for the data about it being effective for COVID, they produce either nothing or they produce the occasional link to the retracted study with Egyptian data where ivermectin was tested with no placebo group. So I think there's a couple of important things to understand. Number one, it is dystopianly horrible. We are in an idiocracy that the Kansas Department of Health has to put out such a statement. Hey, you know what? When you get medications meant for animals, even if it's a medication that humans sometimes use, the animal concentration is for animals. It's not for humans. That is a serious statement put out by the Kansas Department of Health. And ultimately, if people haven't reasoned their way into a belief, it's very difficult to reason their way out of it unless you make them understand they didn't reason their way in. And that means a Socratic method of questioning where you say to people, how did you determine that this works for COVID, right? What evidence would change your mind about that? First, you have to get them to realize the way they got into the belief isn't very sensible in order to expand their or open them to the idea that they could change their view. And unfortunately, we're going to keep talking about ivermectin in this next segment. So I'm going to show you something today, which is notable because it's a total scam on two levels. This is sort of rare. Alex Jones still has a show, conspiracy theorist Alex Jones. He has a show. It's not really appearing in many places because he's been banned from YouTube, Facebook, I think Spotify, and others. InfoWars conspiracy theorist Alex Jones had a complete and total meltdown over ivermectin. Okay. In the segment, Alex Jones purports to take ivermectin for his audience to prove to them it's safe and it's great. Now, there are two scams here, and I'm not going to say either is more important to understand than the other. Both are really important to understand. The first scam is that Alex Jones doing this means anything about the safety or efficacy of ivermectin for COVID. We've actually looked at studies, there are no actual RCTs, double-blind RCTs, randomly controlled trials that tell us ivermectin does anything good prophylactically or for active treatment of COVID. You look at Joe Rogan, who took ivermectin and 6 other things for something from which most people recover anyway, right? I mean, doesn't mean we don't take it seriously, but most people recover. And you see that he took ivermectin and azithromycin and monoclonal antibodies, all these different things. That's not anything. That's nothing. That doesn't tell us anything. When you look at actual studies, the study people tend to point to on ivermectin is an Egyptian study where there was ivermectin versus hydroxychloroquine, no placebo group. It's not rigorous. It's simply not rigorous. So Alex Jones taking ivermectin on his show doesn't actually tell us anything. Second part is it actually sort of looks like Alex Jones only pretends to take the pills and actually drops it under his desk and doesn't even take the pill. So it may be a scam on that level as well. So let's start looking at the video and see what we can make of it. I would get the kids out of the room for this one. That's a disclaimer. Let's go.
Care, people. Overhead shot, please. You know what this is? This is ivermectin for humans that won a Nobel Prize as an antiviral. And this is inhalable, or these are the tablet steroids. So let me show you.
Okay, so let's stop right there. First of all, the steroid. Why would you take a steroid unless you need it? Steroids are not prophylactic for viruses. Steroids reduce inflammation, which is why sometimes they're given. We were looking at dexamethasone when people have real lung compromise. You give dexamethasone to reduce the inflammation and maybe allow the lungs to heal. But steroids suppress the immune system and they can actually extend how long it takes to clear the virus. So why you would randomly take a steroid unless you're sick and it's been prescribed? Steroids have so many side effects from a mental health standpoint. They can cause mania, panic attacks, insomnia. It's crazy, right? The whole prednisone is one of the things Rogan took, and that's why it's here. But I think Alex Jones mostly focuses in on the ivermectin. So let's continue.
I was going to do this anyways earlier. See this?
Watch closely.
See this, Fauci? You see this, Bill Gates? I'm going to kill those prions, you bastard murderers. Going to hit me with a bioweapon, you monster. You want to suppress me? You want to kill me, you son of a bitch? You goddamn demon? You think I'm easy to kill? Think I'm going to roll over to your crap?
So listen, I've looked at this a few times. It does look to me like when Alex Jones is making a big to-do of grabbing his water or beer or whatever he's using to slug this, it looks like he sort of just drops the pill under his desk. I don't know. We'll look at it one more time and continue. I think the point is, whether he really took it or not, it doesn't actually change anything about ivermectin. I think he might have dropped the pill below his desk.
You goddamn demon? You think I'm easy to kill? Think I'm going to roll over to your crap?
No.
No. And Joe Rogan kicked your murdering ass, too. You'd love to bury him, too, you little monster maggot. He's in this National Geographic piece about, oh, I don't usually deal with my enemies right away. I get them later. Yeah, you creep up on with a poison injection, dressed up in a lab coat, you little Joseph Mengele, Nuremberg Code violating monster.
So these are analogies to Nazi experimenters in terms of public health officials right now.
You damn monster.
Yeah, I don't know that he's really taking the pills.
See our little cancer proteins like that. Nobel Prize winning for humans. Nobel Prize winning for humans. Nobel Prize winning for humans. Nobel Prize winning for humans.
So here he's actually having what appears to be a psychotic break.
Nobel Prize winning for humans. What, 2005? Nobel Prize winning for humans. Oh, Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan. He went and drank the horse paste. He's stupid. I bet he got it from Alex Jones. They're both so dumb. They're both going to be dead. Yeah, that's why Joe's worth like $300 million. Yeah, he's real stupid. That's why he lives in a $60 million house on the river. You leftists taking all the shots and dying are the dumbasses. He's the one that headlines with Dave Chappelle, not you. You're stupid. And I sure wish you'd wake up. But you sit there calling me stupid, an independent media person that built the biggest independent media operation in the world, that changed the whole paradigm with my badass listeners, and you sit around and laugh at us? Medical doctors gave that to me. It is incredible. It helped my family. It helped me. It helped everybody. And it's approved for humans for all sorts of viral stuff. But that murderer Fauci doesn't want you to know because he wants the planet for himself and he wants you dead. Well, guess what, Fauci? We ain't rolling over and dying so easily, you little murderer.
Okay. So that's pretty serious stuff. Now, imagine seeing that and saying, whoa, you know what? It seems like a pretty logical thing to take ivermectin based on what I saw. And obviously no sensible person could watch that and come away with that belief. A complete and total meltdown from Alex Jones. But unfortunately, for the people that hear him talk about his supplements and colloidal silver and, you know, who knows what, and they buy that stuff, it's not that different to hear him talk about taking ivermectin and prednisone. And I mean, he might have been high on steroids. That mania could be steroid-induced mania for all we know, if he's really taking it for no reason. So there's two scams here. I already told you about them. But then on top of that, there's the sort of social tragedy, the public tragedy of people who get medical advice from Alex Jones. And it's just a sad state of affairs for the country, folks. Really, really sad state of affairs. Let's go to the voicemails. You can call me anytime, and many do call at very strange times during which I'm typically sleeping, at 219-2-DAVID-P. I do have 600 voicemails to triage from the long weekend. I'm working on it. But here is one asking about whether I speak an additional language. Take a listen to this.
Hi, David. Hello, sir. I was wondering whether or not your family speaks Judeo-Espanol or Ladino. This is a dying Sephardic language. I myself am a Sephardic Jew. I was wondering whether or not your family, especially because they speak Spanish, is a family that speaks this. I'm the first in my family in 500 years to not speak it fluently. My family are Turkish Jews, which most people don't know exists, but there is a population of Jewish folks in Turkey, and we were accepted by Sultan Bayezid II after the Inquisition. He famously told Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand, what you consider to be garbage, we consider to be treasure.
Whoa.
And accepted my family.
Okay. Yeah, no, my family is not Sephardic and we do not speak Ladino. or Judeo-Spanish. Being Ashkenazi and being born in Argentina, we just spoke Spanish. That's it. But a fascinating language. And I'm glad to give a list of the languages I don't speak. It would just be a very, very long list. And it would make for a pretty boring show. But no, fascinating history to the language. Don't speak a word of it. Although I don't know how similar it is to Spanish. Maybe it's sort of like with Portuguese or some of the Spanish dialects where it just sounds, or Italian or French, where it sounds similar enough that I could understand it. All right, we have a tremendous bonus show for you today. Portland is set to vote on banning travel from Texas. This would be sort of a retaliation to the new Texas abortion law. We'll talk about that on the bonus show. Number 2, a judge has ruled that an Ohio hospital cannot be forced to give patients ivermectin, period. And number 3, El Salvador has become sort of the first Bitcoin nation. They have now bought as part of their national reserves, I guess is the word to use. They have bought, I think it's 200 Bitcoin. What does this mean? What are the pros and cons? Could we see more countries do it? Is this crazy? Does it make any sense? We will discuss that on today's bonus show. How do you access the bonus show? Very easy. You sign up at joinpacman.com. It's that simple. You sign up and within 30 seconds, you could be listening to the bonus show. If you already have an account on Patreon or want to make one for whatever reason, you might prefer it. You can also access the bonus show by making a pledge at patreon.com/David Pakman Show of at least $5 a month. We will see everybody then, or if not, on tomorrow's show.